Welcome to episode 31 of Building Blocks with Brennan. Today we connect with Josh, the founder and CEO of MorphoMFG. Over the past 10 years, many things have changed in the industry, but nothing more apparent than how individuals can raise funding. We always have that VC route or getting money from family and friends or that rich uncle who wants to give some cash to help you follow your dreams. But one thing that's become growing and more apparent over the days is these Kickstarters, Indiegogo, and crowdsourcing methods to create funding or get funding from the masses by selling a dream, selling a product, having that MVP, and getting it ready to launch. Josh was a veteran early in the days, creating his own headphone company, raising $40,000. But he quickly learned some of the challenges when it comes to manufacturing. Who do you reach out to build a product, whether it be hardware or even software? But how do you get a group of people, get a supply chain up and running once you raise these Kickstarters? Josh realized there was a problem there, not only he faced, but many in the industries as more and more individuals looked to develop products online. Josh realized that he could be the intermediary, work with these manufacturers as he's located in China, bilingual, working with many of these locals to get these products made for other individuals in the kickstarting world. Initially started off like any entrepreneur, grinding, picking up the phone, and getting connected with these Kickstarters. But over time, things have changed. Right now, what Josh is trying to do and really develop with MorphoMFG is to be able to build the Rolls Royces. China in the past was not known for quality, but today you can develop high quality goods, get them shipped out for a fair price. And if you're looking to develop a product, bring it to market, or develop the next Rolls Royce of quality, reach out to MorphoMFG, take a look at their website, and see how they can help you go from ideation into your consumer's hands.
Cool. So my name is Josh Fairbairn. I was born and raised in Toronto, and I've just been doing, every entrepreneur as a kid type of stuff. The candy business, whatever, little eBay business, and then I grew up Mormon, and so I went on a mission, and I learned to speak Chinese, and I went down to the States for school, for university, studying biochem. I really like science, but I just woke up one morning and was like, what am I doing here? Right. To even have any sort of influence in science, you need some money. And I like business, and I was already fluent in Mandarin. So I basically said, all right, I'm out of here. And my parents, are supportive, but my mom worked in a hospital. My dad was a lawyer. And so they were like, okay, you can go, but financially you're going to be taking care of yourself. So I jumped on a plane to Guangzhou with $500 um, on a whim and a prayer, and no job, no apartment, no friends, no nothing really. But I just knew that it was the place to go. So this is like 8 years ago. And when I got here, I just started kind of doing odd jobs, right? I found a guy back then. Now China's a little different, but I found a guy who was getting foreigners who spoke Chinese on national television. And so I started doing stand-up comedy in Chinese on Chinese national TV and rapping at clubs. I was trying to play basketball, semi-professional.
Yeah.
And then I had started to save up enough money, and I made a pair of headphones, and I had everything was all lined up. We had built a really cool team. And on the first day on Indiegogo, we did 20K, which now is like whatever, right? But this is 2014. Nobody was really doing that. And so I was ecstatic. I got on the bus. It was a 4-hour bus trip out to the factory to see the prototype. And it was just this steaming pile of shit. It was brutal. It was a dream crusher. And I was out down for the count for probably 3 months. But then I realized, with the advent of crowdfunding and everything that was coming out of it, I realized that rather than trying to find gold, it'd be better to sell shovels. And so I just hit up literally every Kickstarter campaign and Indiegogo campaign that I could and said, where are you manufacturing? This is what happened to me. Obviously, our sales approach has changed in the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
But back then, it was just, pure grinding. And the response was fantastic, right? Within 6 months, I had 100 customers. I had no idea what I was doing, right? A 3-semester dropout. And I had some experience because I worked for Odesk, which is Upwork now. And through working with them, I saw the inner workings of freelancers and how that whole community worked. So I hired an entire office in India. And then, yeah, we just kept scaling. And when we had holes, we made good hires. Now we've got an office headquarters here in Guangzhou, the office in India, a small office in Hong Kong, and we're looking at setting up an office in the US probably next year. So that's it in a nutshell.
Well, what's really interesting is, especially you're saying, kind of developing the remote work when you started out using a lot of freelancers. It's funny how now everyone's almost a freelancer in remote work with COVID and everything. I know most of the organizations are limiting office space and kind of working with remote teams. When you were starting out, like you said, newer place, although you were there for a little bit, kind of taking odd jobs, was it difficult to get a footing or find other individuals to work with? Or did you have a small network you had once you had your idea and you wanted to start launching the business? Like, how did you get employee 1, 2, or 3? Or was it mostly just you just starting out, kind of reaching out to manufacturers, trying to kind of be the intermediary between these Kickstarter or crowdfunding campaigns and the development of the products?
Right. I would say our employee rollout is kind of like this. First was just me. Second was using the Odesk platform and hiring mostly Indian freelancers. Basically sales and marketing. I couldn't continue to do it at that volume. So I needed support. Then I was like, okay, well now we have all these customers and have no back like support for the back end here in China. So one of the odd jobs I did was teaching at a university, even though I don't have a degree, funny enough. And and I had like 1,000 students, and so I was looking at them, and I'm like, who wants an internship? And kind of just handpicked my best students,
Hmm.
and they worked for free for a little bit, and now one of them's my comptroller. One of them is director of operations. One's my partner, my COO.
Hmm.
And so we kind of just figured it out together. And then the kind of final phase that we're in now is no, we don't hire just students or friends or whatever.
Hmm.
I'd say 4 years ago, so still kind of early on,
Hmm.
I brought on another partner as my CFO.
Hmm.
He's a white-haired veteran, and really knows. That was kind of the start of hiring for talent rather than
Yeah.
convenience. And the company, I mean, every company goes through that phase of not knowing what the hell they're doing. But being able to start hiring talent and having Bill come in and then kind of reverse engineering what companies are supposed to look like from an architecture standpoint has obviously changed the company tremendously.
It's so funny how you touch on that family and friend hiring stage. There were for many startups that were either still in that stage or I was one of their first, you could say, like, real hires. And it's actually surprisingly, I always found it surprisingly challenging because then having a small team, and you've probably seen this as well, once you start growing, the individuals who you might have had as a CFO, all these C-level suites wouldn't have the same expertise at 100 people company versus a 4-person company. And that transition can always be a little bit wonky and difficult as you start getting hiring more for talent, like you were saying, getting more veterans into the roles to really help scale that business from that 5-person mom pop shop to more of a legitimate organization that has possibility for multiple offices and scalability. During your experience early on within the Kickstarter world, I mean, back then it seemed almost like the Wild West. How did you learn about Kickstarting? Like, was it something where you wanted to crowdfund initially and then the website started taking off, or how did you initially start off in a headphone space? Did you have a
Yeah,
did you enjoy music, or kind of how did you start with that? Because that's always a unique
right.
starting point, especially back in the day when getting money wasn't the easiest thing as it is today with all the
Sure.
organizations and websites.
Yeah. So, like I had said at the beginning, right? I was rapping at clubs, I'm definitely the guy at the party that freestyles at the end of the night.
Mhm.
That's always been a big part of my life. And, I had the beats right when they came out. Actually, funny enough, somebody gifted them to me when I was a missionary because I certainly couldn't afford them back then.
Mhm.
And so I just had those with me everywhere. And I went to the Canton Fair, and I was just like, my mind was blown. I don't know if you've looked into it or seen it or been, but it's just, there's hundreds of thousands of factories in this
Mhm.
province alone, which is, 100 and something million people here.
Mhm.
And I'm just going around and I'm like, I don't really need to know that much, at least I thought, to make a product
Mhm.
because I'm here and, I'm going out for dinner with these guys and they're introducing me to engineers. And, I'm a tall, big guy with tattoos who speaks Mandarin, and I'm whiter than, a piece of paper. So
Mhm.
these guys are just looking and kind of wowed by me being there. And so I got a lot of support, and I was really confident that I was about to build these amazing headphones. And from an audio perspective, they were really good, but you couldn't even put them on your head without them falling apart.
Mhm.
And so I think with all of those things, I think my head got a little too big, to be honest. I had known some people who had done crowdfunding. One of my buddies did a $400,000 campaign, and I was like, his video is not even good. If I can do this for sure.
Mhm.
And so I kind of waltzed into it thinking it was going to be a home run, and it kind of was for 24 hours
Mhm.
until I got hit on the head with the reality hammer, and that kind of took the wind out of the sails.
That's it's always such a funny story. How I know a lot of people in hopping in, well, in whether it be developing a project or hopping into entrepreneurship, once you always get into the grind, as you know, it's always different than how it looks from the outside. I know a lot of people. I had my fair share when I was an undergrad, or even earlier on my career. Everyone's like, "Oh, I can start a product on Kickstarter. This potato salad raised $50,000. Well, I can do that too. I'll just throw up a video. It'll be so easy." And then a lot of people, although you had some success early, I know a lot of people who burned a lot of money thinking that it was all just simple luck and no skill. But over time, you obviously realize that sure, there might be a few that are more generic, lucky, but there is a lot of thought behind the very successful ones, especially when it comes with repeat success over time. There tends to be a formula there. So when you try to launch this business, you realize manufacturing is a challenge. Was the next step really then you just working with your contacts, say, hey, I had these challenges, let me see if I can find others? And when you're finding your first customers, did you focus on North America or Kickstarters in China, or was this really just a shotgun approach saying, hey, I'm having this issue, I think a lot of other people are, let me just see who else might be facing the same challenges I did earlier on in the creation of the business?
Total shotgun. I'm a big believer in, if you have to work too hard to sell or market your
Mhm.
product, you're either late, you're in a congested industry, or you just don't know what you're doing, right? And so
Mhm.
for me, it was just like, I might as well have been knocking on door and selling anything, right? It was
Mhm.
just odd because people were opening the door and saying, come in, and sending me deposits before I had really even done anything, right?
Mhm.
Crowdfunding has changed so much. But at the beginning, it was more of these potato salads. It
Mhm.
was more, I remember distinctly, this one guy had a wallet and he raised 250K, and the wallet was just trash, right? It
Mhm.
made no sense. He didn't know what he was doing, but now all of a sudden he had a $250,000 in the bank account and needed to deliver this wallet. And so at the beginning, right, it was crazy as someone who had never really had money before.
Mhm.
Um, Seeing all of these customers and on all of their deposits rolling in simultaneously, I was working, 20-hour days for like probably 6 months. It was nuts, but it was definitely cool being kind of at the genesis of crowdfunding and being one of the main providers for the industry, because it wasn't long until Kickstarter and Indiegogo were reaching out to me, as some of these campaigns weren't delivering. And they were saying, look, we need to work on our liabilities or we're going to have class action lawsuits at the yin yang. So what can you do to support to make sure that these campaigns are actually delivering? And so I went and sat down with them in their offices and had some really, really productive conversations with them in the early days.
That's so. I was just about to ask that. Like, what have you seen obviously over the years? The whole crowdfunding idea, the business model has grown substantially. And I was going to actually ask the same thing, as I know a lot of these were in the hot water before with people not delivering on their promises or raising, $250,000, even a few $100,000 or even a few thousands of dollars, and not being able to get the product out the door because it was not feasible or impossible. And obviously, general knowledge also got a little bit better to take that video, that MVP, minimum viable product, with a grain of salt. But from when you initially launched your first product to kind of where you are today working with all these businesses, what have you seen or what has been some of the big shifts in the crowdfunding space, or a few takeaways?
I would say the biggest is the requirement to have some capital and some sort of team built pre-campaign. So not to disrespect the early campaigns, but it was a bit of a money grab, right? People were throwing stuff up that didn't make sense, but it was so fresh, people didn't care. They were just backing stuff almost to be able to have some social clout, right? To flex a little bit and say, I'm part of this new world of crowdfunding. And so people were going in upside down and backwards, and it was pretty ridiculous. Now, you know, I would say for us, business wise, two things have changed. We're getting on the phone after our sales teams onboard these new clients, and we're getting on the phone with 9 guys, 3 of whom are engineers. One of whom has supply chain background, the designer, and the CEO, right, for the introduction call. And so they're building out these really robust campaigns, no longer about that 30-day campaign money grab, but really creating some social proofs so that they can garner further investment as well as just have a launch pad for their new company, right? Because they know that 250,000 revenue from the campaign isn't enough to feed 9 mouths.
Yeah.
They just know that if they do a good job, they can potentially get some VC interest and then have the investment and the money that they need to build the foundation for a real company. So it's developed and turned into this real thing rather than a gimmick.
I've spoken even to a few startups where right now they're using the whole crowdfunding campaign, but they're legitimate businesses, have raised capital before, but they're using it almost as a stepping stone to raise more VC money or to launch a new product or to try, test the market for other things. So I've even seen on my end being few steps removed from the whole crowdfunding world, but more, I guess you could say, fleshed out businesses with multiple employees using crowdfunding as a way of, or an alternative way of raising capital and or pre-selling products, which is much different than 5-10 years ago, where it was, hey, I have an idea, I'm in an ideation stage, I don't know where my manufacturing is going to come from, I don't know where my development team is going to come from, I just have an idea and let's see if we can raise funding. And I think, it's probably the same way it was, this was before my time, probably in the early 2000s with the dot-com boom, where if you had an idea that said internet in it, you could get money. And then very soon people realized that you have to have some checks and balances before giving thousands of dollars to people. So obviously your business starts, you start reaching out, getting a lot of initial traction. You said, hundreds of customers. As your business matured and as the industry matured, how do you choose who your customers are? Do you have a qualification list or a checklist they have to go through to kind of have the validity for your organization to help out, or kind of what is the, I guess, yes or no point for working with a lot of these projects, especially like with you're saying in the past, some of these not really having the wherewithal or even the capital to launch a lot of these products initially.
Right. So as we've built out the business, right, of course, we continue to grow out the systems and monitor the new clients that we're bringing in, right? It's no longer like, oh my, you want to work? Okay, what can I do? What can I, for free? What, it's not like that anymore.
Yeah.
So we have, an entire department for development, and the sales guys work with the development to see if it's a good partnership fit. And then we have 3 phases. So if they get approved, because just, like I was saying, right, it's no longer about having little customers, right? Our target market no longer is crowdfunding. We still get a lot of business that goes through those funnels, but we've moved up into more SMEs, and trying, my goal for the company is to help people build the Rolls Royces and the Rolexes of their own industries, and help them scale their supply chain early from 1 million to 100 million, and to help them reach those revenue targets. And some of our customers have actually done that. So they go through an initial screening process from our back end. If that's approved, then they pay the onboarding fee, which is the first phase of our 3 phases. Onboarding, development, prototyping, and then finally mass production. And then, obviously our goal is to continue to flip that mass production phase and start new and add new SKUs to what they're doing and add more product. But definitely have clamped down. It's tough, right? Because coming from $0 when I started the business, I always want to support that. And we obviously make tons of exceptions. But if you're going to come with no money, you better come goddamn well prepared, and come with a really good plan and a really good team. Be able to execute, because if you can't do that and you have no money, you're kind of SOL.
And that's so true. I've seen obviously a lot of startups, or even a lot of businesses, kind of going to those through the stages, kind of the early stages, like you're saying, accepting everyone. You want to give me money? Yes. What do I even if it's not what your business does? I've known a lot of businesses, especially early on. You're like, I guess I can do that. I'll try it. I'll figure it out. You're giving me money. Oh, but then eventually having to take that, almost that looking in the mirror point, saying, okay, this is not what my dream was, or this is not what my business does. I have to start focusing on my key customers and growing from there. And that transition is always funny. I know I've worked for some businesses where they be in one industry, selling to another industry because someone gave them a few $1,000s. And looking back, they always say, we wasted so much time doing this. We should have just focused on the businesses that we were intended to support, which is always, it's like any growing pains, kind of learning as you go. Obviously, especially within China, there's been wild growth within the past 10 years. Since you've been there, have you seen some changes in how either foreigners coming over to start businesses there? I know when I traveled around, a lot of entrepreneurs from North America going to China, going to Asian countries to start their businesses. Have you seen a big shift towards more people going overseas from North America out east for funding, for manufacturing, for creating products more and more over these past 10 years? And kind of what has the shift been? Because from my view, from the other side of the pond, it's almost magical. It seems like every day there's more and more billionaires, more and more money going there. But how's it more from the ground floor?
I liked your use of morph there. Nice plug. It's odd, right? Because headlines and the news are going to paint one very different picture. But the reality is that every day I see more Beamers, more Benzes, and more Bentleys, right? Shout out Lloyd Banks. But it's just, there's so much money here, and people are just really moving, and it's a nonstop. I know Bryant is going to say the city that never sleeps is New York, but the country that never sleeps is China, right? They're just always working, always pushing the envelope on what else they can do and what other businesses they can create. So the environment here is crazy. Obviously with COVID the last 2 years, even myself, right, as the company's scaling, I was locked out of China for the better part of a year. No sympathy, but I was stuck in Bali. And then I was out actually on the Pacific coast outside Vancouver. But I couldn't get back, right? And it wasn't a question of money. It wasn't a question of, flights. It was literally, you just couldn't get a visa. and it was a very strenuous process and very frustrating. But prior to COVID, absolutely right, tons of people
Mhm.
coming out, more professionals, right? The early days were a lot of teachers and odd job type stuff, and that's how a lot of my friends that do business out here got started.
Mhm.
But as China developed, there was no longer the demand for that type of entrepreneur, right?
Mhm.
It started to be, you better have something, or what are you doing here? And the people that remain here, whether that's through their connections or through paying an exorbitant
Mhm.
amount of money for getting their visa or whatever it may be, you're seeing, I think, a lot more top tier talent out here right now.
Mhm.
Um, Not even as much entrepreneurs, but more, executive C-level type professionals that are helping their companies manage
Mhm.
international relationships right now, because there's certainly quite a lot of shade thrown on China internationally.
Mhm. And that's really interesting because obviously, from like I said, only news I get was from the headlines and like anything else. They're either overinflated or it's always way more cynical than it has to be. And obviously, I've even seen, like I said, from the entrepreneurship world, many more organizations going over there, whether it be for more of an accelerator or startup esque situations where they have better connections with, like you're saying, even with your business, the manufacturing, the suppliers, the vendors, kind of working more closely. Where before it was like no one knew. You would just send an email, hope for the best, and you get the product 6 months later and realize this is not what I wanted at all. So it's really nice seeing more of a global connection for everything from creation to end of final product, especially on these CPG goods where the product brand, everything's related on how well the product looks, whether it be on the shelf or when you're shipping it out. Obviously, you've had some success over these past years. Things have grown, and like you said, you did some odd jobs in the past. Really, have always had the entrepreneurial spirit, I guess they would say. As your business has grown, you've had more and more employees. Has there been anything you were surprised whether how hard it was to do or how easy it was that people made it seem way more difficult than it actually was?
It's a good question. Um, Hard is managing staff, because I think I think being a CEO, I think one of my stronger traits is being able to be humble and
Mhm.
realize that this is a mission that all of us are in together. And the second people don't feel that mission, they're gone, right? Like we said earlier, right? This is a freelancer world, and my staff is all bilingual. Well, not all, but most of
Mhm.
them are bilingual. Most of them are great, and I'm super proud that they're willing to work for me. But managing their expectations and helping employees, future growth and their goals, and making sure that you can do that for everybody at the same
Mhm.
time has been both tremendously difficult, but also tremendously rewarding to see. When I started teaching, I had, sophomore, juniors who had no idea what they want to do, and now they're making more money than they ever thought that they would, right? So,
Mhm.
and going back to their hometowns in rural parts of China and building a home for their family type of stuff.
Mhm.
So obviously that has been tough, but really really great.
Mhm.
In terms of easy, I don't know if anything's easy in
Yeah.
business, but
And it's always the case. I think even what you said in regards to managing staff, I feel even like growing up, everyone always said like, your people are your capital. Your people are the most important thing. And coming from, I guess, a little bit more capitalistic view, or even going through business school, where you're like, well, okay, they just say that. But I think it's probably within the past few years, and I think going forward, the biggest shift will be that employees have the ability to switch jobs a lot easier than ever before. Prior was stuck. I mean, prior to COVID, it was, well, you can't switch because we know we're the only big location. We're only the big employer within the area. Now, I mean, especially within Canada, North America, I can work at relatively anywhere across Canada, being Canadian, and I no longer have to be geo locked to my location. And now we've seen the shift in organizations trying to focus more on their employees and more on culture. And I think over the next few years, understanding what a company culture is will be one of the biggest things, because I feel a lot of times it's not well understood. Now people just think, oh, we have a ping pong table, we're a startup, we're young, we're hip, we have a good culture, when that's really just the tip of an iceberg, not really related
Right.
to how happy employees are.
Actually, about easy, that has been something that has been easy for me because, I wear a hat.
Mhm,
Like I said, I have tattoos. I wear jerseys, right?
mhm,
I am exactly what I present. And I think being able to tell the story of our company has been something that has got a lot of people excited. I
mhm,
mean, we do have a ping pong table and a pool
mhm.
table, but I'll tell you, in China, that's very different than having one in Toronto
Yeah.
or LA. Just we're like a family, right? We had a
Mhm,
big Halloween party. We have fun together. We make sure we have lots of parties, right? You
mhm.
spend probably a third of your life working, and it's definitely been very important for me to make sure that that third of everyone in MorphoMFG's life is fun filled.
Mhm. And that is so important. I think people always undervalue the idea of having those team celebrations, team parties, because it's, so for some people they're like, oh, this is just, waste of time. Why am I doing this? But even from the employee side, or even as the CEO managing a team, it's nice to kind of break down those walls, connect on a personal level, especially like you said, a third of their life is working. And a lot of them have dreams, aspirations. So being able to understand where they want to go and try to help them build their dream is very good, obviously very interesting, but also allows expectation management, which is one of the most important things, is having a clear idea of what the mission and vision is, so that when they go into work every day, they know what they're working towards, and it's not just for that paycheck or just for to make more money. There's some value behind it. So obviously, you've had extreme success, and obviously the industry is growing both within China and across the world. I guess entrepreneurs developing more and more products and looking to go overseas to help manufacture and grow. What does the next 5 years look for you? Is there, I know you said you're looking to expand to the States, have an office in the States. Kind of what is the roadmap, or what is your view on kind of how the business will shift as the organization grows?
So I touched on this a bit earlier, but
Mhm,
Rolexes and Rolls Royces, right?
mhm,
Any manufacturing company, or sorry, country,
mhm,
where the manufacturing sector is a big part of their GDP, goes through these growing pains where people are no longer willing to work for that amount of money.
mhm,
And I saw that right when I got to China, right? I had all of these other English teachers here that were saying that they were doing what I was doing, but I looked at what they were doing, and they were giving like 15 umbrellas with their friend's business logo and sending it to their office, right? That wasn't business to me.
mhm,
That was the impression of doing what I was doing.
mhm,
And, it was a flex. But I just knew that that was not the future that China was going to be taking,
mhm,
right? And so if it weren't for COVID, we would already be doing our textiles in
mhm,
Indonesia or in Cambodia or in
mhm,
Vietnam. We have all the connections. Right before COVID, we were about to open up another few offices for some of these. I'm not going to say low quality because that's not our
mhm,
business, right? If you want to
mhm,
do something super cheap, we're just not your company.
mhm,
But at the end of the day, manufacturing is a commodity, raw material based industry, and
mhm,
things cost what they cost at the bottom line. And so I knew very early that China was not going to be the place to
mhm,
do that type of stuff. And I just that from day one we weren't doing umbrellas unless that
mhm,
umbrella, also had some IoT tech built into
mhm,
it, right? It just wasn't what we ever focused on, and I'm glad that I made that decision early on because now you look at still, right? People say
mhm,
everything's moving away from China. It's not. Cheap stuff is moving away from China, right? There's been a common misconception for almost the entire time I've been here that China makes cheap stuff. While you can still get your garbage made here, it's still certainly a part of the ecosystem here. It's
mhm,
becoming less and less. And people say you can't make good stuff in China. Again, not true. You just need to build proper supply chains and work with specialist manufacturers who build one component. And then you figure out, that's kind of our whole thing. We call it the component control method.
Mm-hmm.
And we build individual components with factories all over Guangdong,
Mm-hmm.
Canton in English, I guess, and then bring it together and assemble at a third party. And so by doing that, right, we are protecting IP. Not, I think we have great relationships with our suppliers, but I wanted to take trust and liking my suppliers out of the equation, right? If nobody sees the big picture, if nobody knows what the end goal is for the product, it doesn't matter if they make a component because that's all they know.
Mm-hmm.
And then by using, assembly files, bringing those all together, even though we're not cheap, by doing that, we cut out, and I hate this phrase, but I have to say it, cut out a lot of the middlemen, right? You
Mm-hmm.
can't cut out all the middlemen. The raw materials by themselves are probably one place. Turning those raw materials into something usable is another. You can't get rid of middlemen, but you can get rid of useless middlemen who aren't really providing value to the general equation. And so that's what we do, which helps us control the price, not make a cheap price, but control the price, helps us keep quality high,
Mm-hmm.
right? When I got here, I just tried to find everyone I knew that worked for Foxconn and
Mm-hmm.
see what they did, and then try to reverse engineer that and build that into our own practices. And probably the most important when you're doing or you're trying to do Rolls Royce, Rolex level of quality within your specific industries, IP is important. Because the second something takes off, it's not just China, it's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Second something takes off, people want to do that, lacking creativity, a little bit of artistic
Mm-hmm.
brain dead, practices in business where people just try to go after and FOMO after the thing that's taking off.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly it's impossible to say that we entirely avoid that, but we give our customers a runway to execute, to get out the gates, to build a story about their brand so that when the copycats do inevitably reverse engineer and come after them, they have a head start. And if they execute properly and do a good job, no one's catching up.
And that's really interesting. I mean, even from my point of view, in regards to China, I've seen it as well as organizations like China's no longer the place where you only sells obviously cheap things or everything's manufactured cheap. Over these past 10, 20 years, just because all the money's gone there and the infrastructure is building up, a lot of higher end products are being built there. You can't really go there if you want the lowest dollar amount items. You have to really start manufacturing elsewhere for that. And we've seen that within China, especially, that more and more high quality goods are being developed. More knowledge is into developing a more in-depth supply chain, kind of connecting different organizations together to build those higher quality products. And I like how you said that, for your organization, there's value add. It's not just trying to find the cheapest manufacturer to develop the product. There's a lot of thought and process that goes into it, whether it be, like you said, removing the middleman or developing a better quality product by consolidating a lot of these steps together and getting these products to the highest quality to the end user or to the organization so that they really can get quality for value. Have you, so things are growing and shifting, and like you said, you're trying to build the Rolls Royces, trying to develop higher and higher quality goods. When working with these different organizations, have you seen the shift in what is required? Like initially, maybe it was just manufacturing. Now there's a lot more, like you said, developing a stronger process, stronger supply chain. When working with these larger customers, has there been a shift in how business has to be done, or is it just get more and more complex within the supply chain, just as more expensive and larger you get?
Manufacturing is a lot of preemptive work, and people are like, okay, just make it. And that's why we have this onboarding
Mm-hmm.
phase, right? To me, I'm obviously biased,
Mm-hmm.
but the onboarding phase is the most important part of the entire process, because you make one tiny little mistake and you don't fix it during onboarding. A year from now, what happens when you're scaling and you realize that this is a critical damage point that you
Mm-hmm.
can't scale anymore because of? And so we want to tear that apart from the very beginning. Our customers, they have a few choices, right? Come prepared or pay us to prepare you,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's it. And if you don't want to pay and you're not prepared, we'll tell you where to go, and no hard feelings, and it's not personal. But we can't build Rolls Royces if we have the blueprints for a Toyota Corolla, and there's so much detail that goes into that process. And we're hiring more and more, like I had said earlier, more talent, right? We have electric engineers, we have ID and MD, right? We want to do all of that in house so that we can guarantee that level of quality from the beginning, and verify that the clients that say they have that already verify that they do, right? I had, right when I was starting, I'll leave his name out of it so it's not embarrassing, but he raised 1.3 million on Indiegogo, came to me, said that he had spent $250,000 in Silicon Valley engineering his product. And I'm not an engineer, right? I hustled things together. I know what I'm doing, but I'm not an engineer. And I looked at his files, and even I laughed, because in typical Silicon Valley fashion, they were these beautifully aesthetically pleasing designs, and they weren't even possible to mold. And I could tell that without too much experience, right? And so being able, not just me, on the horn with people, but being able to have the engineering backup to actually say, not only that this isn't doable, that your design isn't viable, why isn't it viable, how we can fix it, how long it's going to take. We have a few big signs in the office, but one of the most important is under commit and over deliver. And we just don't blow smoke. If it's going to take 6 months, it's taking 6 months. You got it. There's a famous manufacturing triangle with quality, time, and money, and you get to pick two. And a lot of people don't want to pick two, and that's what it is. What it is. But at the beginning, it's important to focus in on that. Pick two. Get all your T's crossed and your I's dotted in the early stages. Excuse me, to prevent problems in the future.
And that is so true. I think I've seen so many businesses almost fail before launching just because you don't want to think of the hard questions. You just want to make those pretty MVPs and start building stuff, start selling without realizing, okay, I have to step back. Even on the entrepreneurship front, like, who is my customer? Why are they buying? Okay, now I understand that. How am I going to manufacture? How am I going to get to my customer? How are we going to do customer support? All these questions that are not always, I guess people say, like the sexy part of it, looking at how things are being made, how we're going to have customer support is never the fun stuff. It's always, okay, I want to raise money and sell, but never take a step back and realize, how do I support all this growth we're expecting? And like you were saying, how the onboarding process is so invaluable, because you have to get those ducks in a row so you don't come to finally getting a large customer, finally being able to sell a lot and realizing, oh my goodness, either we can't build the product or there's a fatal flaw in our design that no one realized because no one took a step back to do. And I think that's why it's so important to have, for any customer or for any business, to have a strong onboarding process, first to educate the customer themselves, but also realize what you're getting into, because at the end of the day, it is a partnership between you and the organization you're working with.
Don't get me wrong. I love sexy as much as the next person. There's a very important part of business with the sales and the marketing and the pre-business, the MVP, that is, you can't avoid it, right? You need that to get the hype train going. My problem is when people think that that's how it's going to be forever, and they don't come back down from cloud 9 to reality and realize, okay, you have all this money, now let's actually build this thing that you said you're going to build. Because it happens very rarely, that we can't build something, right? I'm very confident in our team's ability to solve problems, as long as you respect the triangle. And you do your big sexy show, you get everything rolling, you raise a bunch of money, everything's lined up. Then you have to let go of your ego and give us the power to make the decisions that you need us to make for you, because not everybody can do that, and that's fine, right? Delegation on the same path as the freelancing. We have an ability to do almost anything we want anywhere in the world, location independent, but you still have to let go, and you still have to be willing to find first, but then trust partners that you're entrusting to build this thing for you.
Mhm. And that's so true. It is such a big trust thing, and being able to realize, okay, I need to step back because you may not be an expert in the manufacturing, and then giving your organization the ability to say, hey, respecting the triangle, this is what we can do, and understanding that there are steps, and maybe if their knowledge was on the marketing and sales front, trusting you and your team to realize the manufacturing behind it and kind of what is possible, and trusting your partners so that there is a successful relationship to really get the product into people's hands.
And that's the catch 22, right? Because before, that trust was built by our customers coming to China and
Mhm.
seeing us and coming to our office and meeting the team. And that's obviously not tenable now, right? We can't,
Yeah.
that's not an option. So that was a big pivot for us to change our marketing from getting people to come here to providing a window into what we're doing with a lot of video and content and the media strategies that we're employing now. So we've done a few ads that have got, just over a couple million hits.
Mhm.
Obviously, that's paid, so I mean it's not that impressive, but still,
Yeah.
we've got a lot of people to kind of see the more human part of our business without them actually being able to interact with humans, which has been really fun and
Mhm.
really cool and really interesting.
And I've actually seen a few of your ads. Obviously, since from this podcast and kind of looking up the business, you get those paid ads, and they're actually very entertaining. They're very well done. I did want to say that they have
Appreciate
some
it.
humor to them, but they're also, like you said, the people aspect behind it. With COVID and everything, having humans behind a business is so important because you're making connection with a person. I know a lot of my people I know, a lot of my friends are looking to go over to China to either start their career or start a business. What would be some of your big learnings from doing it yourself, being one of the, I guess, earlier, not even that early, 10 years ago seems so early compared to how fast things are growing now, but what would be some of your takeaways to individuals who are wanting to have a similar story, going over to China and kind of learning and growing their careers and businesses there?
It really is, and again, I've spent the bigger portion of my life here, so I don't have tons
Mhm.
of comps in
Mhm.
terms of how things are going in other places. But
Mhm.
it really is, despite the headlines, one of the most accepting countries that I've ever been to.
Mhm.
I've been, to 60 plus countries, and the people here are just so nice and so willing to help you. But
Mhm.
I think the biggest difference, right, if I were to do it now,
Mhm.
is you need a plan, and you can't just fall into Guangzhou's lap anymore.
Mhm.
Guangzhou will eat you up and spit you out the other side these days. But if you come up with a plan, and I'm more than happy, anybody listening, more than happy to give advice, or even meet up if you can make it
Mhm.
out here these days. But really, set up a plan, learn about the market, learn the culture, right? Being able to do Chinese stand up was really kind of my push into this ecosystem, and being able to connect people with humor, right? I think is a really good first step to doing business in a new place, in a new country, with a new language, because it is
Mhm.
different, right? We're used to one thing meaning something, and going into a new place, a new country, expecting that your understanding of the world is going to equal the same understanding to the local people is a huge fatal error. And I,
Mhm.
and I think it's really avoidable if you dig in and do some research.
And that's a great tip. And it's stand up's the funniest thing just because you have to know the language so well and know the humor and culture so well to be effective as well. Just because you have to common events, knowing how the vocabulary as well, which is actually probably one of the smartest things you did, just because it's so effective for public speaking as well.
Yeah, I loved it. The stand up is one of my biggest life achievements for sure. Business, even with, I was going to say business aside, but even with the business, doing stand up on CCTV to a potential 1.4 billion person audience was definitely something that I pounded my chest for.